Chronicles of Narnia franchise had so much potential, especially in 2005 when the first film debuted. Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, it seemed like it was the next progression. Instead, we got a little bit of an uneven film series with some definite highs, but some really low lows. It never really found its legs. With some minor changes, maybe a new director, I think we'd be talking about Narnia in the same breath as the properties I mentioned before. Alas, it did not, but in a world where we got His Dark Materials, the upcoming Percy Jackson series, Narnia is really for the taking. And actually Netflix has had a project rumored for years now. But since that seems to be crawling forward or just not moving at all, today we're gonna cast or recast who could play these iconic roles in Narnia. And although one of the best parts about them is their cast in the 2000s, we're gonna bring them into the 2020s. Today we're tackling the 4 Pevensie kids. Later we're moving on to supporting characters, and potentially beyond the movies if you want to see that. So for today, we're casting Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. So let's recast the Chronicles of Narnia for today. Now before I get started, I want to do the inevitable. Now when they first start tackling a property like this one, the common thing to do is age up the characters. And most of the time, I strongly disagree with that fact. But I feel like Narnia needs it. Like seeing Peter run into battle when he's only 13, or even seeing an 8-year-old Lucy in the first film seems a little bit young. I feel like they actually did a great job with the casting in the first 3 Disney films. They felt perfect to be in that innocent, childlike state, but not too young to be believable. It's also important we cast from the UK. Since the story takes place in really war-stricken England, it only makes sense. Other than that though, we should tackle Peter first. Now, Peter's really the glue of the family. He acts like he's the stand-in father figure, and he tries really hard to be that. He needs to come in his own during the film, but always present as more of a rule follower. Don't get me wrong, he's brave, mature, and most importantly, he's protective of his family. He isn't going to shy away from the unpleasant and really wants to do the right thing, but there's some times where he's a little thick-headed. Now, I feel like in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, his arc is a little bit muted, and he could use a little bit more time to grow. Specifically, get the confidence of Narnia behind him and really dive into his role as the leader of this. I think you could really explore that more so on a season in Netflix, rather than it just being a movie. But of course we need that young talent, but not too young. Someone on the verge of becoming an adult. I end up landing on Harry Collett, who is one of my favorite parts of House of the Dragon. I feel like he communicated so much with the little screen time he had within the series, and considering he's had role after role and has been in the industry for a really long time, I think he can really put this franchise on his shoulders. He's 18 now, but looks younger, but I think that's a perfect age to watch someone grow. But he also has that presence and that honor that we need here.
To Prince Aegon and Prince Aemond, we have not seen each other in years, but I have fond memories of our shared youth. And as men, I hope we may yet be friends and allies. To you and your family's good health, dear uncles.
I think he's a great talent to watch, and I think he'd be great in this role. Also, most likely when they jump times again, he'll be looking for a new role, and a new franchise to sink his teeth into. So Harry Collett as Peter. Next up, let's tackle Susan. Now, in the films, I always felt like Susan got a little bit of the short end of the stick. Everyone really has their moment. Susan sometimes is just kind of there to put Peter back in line, or just accompany Lucy. She doesn't have her moment. Now, a lot of that comes down to the source material, but I'd really like to have a powerful person here. It's also important to note she's described as being the beauty of the family, being really striking and beautiful, and described as having long black hair. The most important thing here is to be the moral compass of the family. Someone who sees reason above all else, acting only when it's a necessity, and really thinking every situation through. I ended up on Bo Gadsden, who actually has had a lot of roles for someone her age, like a younger version of Jin in Rogue One, but it's specifically in The Railway Children Return, where she's the oldest in the group and has this real protective way about her while still being stern.
I lied. He died and come back. Every time I talk about him, one of us cries.
Or more recently in Treason, where she's coming a little bit more into her looks and you can really see her acting style.
Is it dangerous?
What, sweetheart?
Dad's new job. Will we be safe?
Yeah.
And he's armed, right?
And he's armed.
Cool.
No, it's not cool, Cal.
Dad has to do this. Right, Dad?
I think she has this look to her that just feels right in line with the character, and with her piercing eyes, she just feels like Susan to me. So Bo Gadsden as Susan. Next up, let's tackle Edmund, who really starts off as the main conflict of that first film. He has a really great arc where he grows, learns to become not so much of a selfish kid, and eventually becomes regretful and brave on his own. Now, I think it's important we also have that little bit of a hero energy, especially when Peter and Susan aren't there to guide him. He's one of the hardest to cast because he has to do a lot of things. But I am looking to change it up a little bit. Edmund is almost too unlikable in the first film. Annoyingly so, actually. He seems rather hateful, and I'd rather lean into the childish and unexperienced rather than just being vindictive. I want someone who you can see making the wrong decisions, but understanding why they're doing it. I end up on Benjamin Evan Ainsworth, who seems like he could walk that line of being misunderstood like we've seen in the past. He played young Alex in The Sandman, and recently voiced Pinocchio, but it's in The Haunting of Bly Manor, where he really shows that darkness and that misunderstood nature. I think he could play really well into the childish, and at 14, I think he's the perfect age here. He shows he can do the dark and the angry.
Most of the time, but not right now. And believe me, nothing would make me happier than to be arrested by those police you were talking about. To be dragged off this king property.
When I was watching some of his work, I was surprised on how great of a young talent he is. I think he'd fit this role like a glove, but also progress and really turn into the hero that we need him to be. So Benjamin Evan Ainsworth as Edmund. Lastly, we have Lucy, the one who really starts off the wonder in the world of Narnia. She needs to be so sweet, warm, and just cute. Her relation with Mr. Tumnus is the starting point to the whole series. She's one of the best points of the original trilogy, because with an actor like this, and being so young, it can really make or break the movie. Much like Edmund, we need someone who can grow, someone we can follow, but really she's the heart of that first story. She needs to be not afraid, have that confidence to just walk into a new world, and not be terrified. I ended up on Indica Watson. I would love to watch a conversation between her and Mr. Tumnus, and at 12, I think she has the perfect look as well as that perfect sweetness, but she can grow into confidence and grace like we need with this role. That just shows me Lucy shining through.
That's the saddest thing that I've ever heard in my entire life.
Christmas is the greatest day of all because it is the kindest day of all.
And the brightest. And the smiliest. A day when being open-hearted is the most important thing of all. Which is why we won't let them take it from...
For a 12-year-old, she has a ton of work to her name, and I feel confident she could walk into a giant franchise like this one and just own it. So Indica Watson as Lucy. So there are our children, and really the main core of our start in Narnia. I think they would work incredibly well together, and even looking at them side by side, it just works. Their personality, the ages, I think it meshes together to be a great start to our story. Next video, we're going to move to Aslan, Mr. Thomas, the White Witch, and more, so stay tuned for that. As well as let me know if I should go beyond the movies, beyond the typical. Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what characters I shouldn't miss. As always though, thank you so much for watching, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.